like you are on YouTube live, like right now. Like,
Look
oh,
at that.
hello.
Learning stuff
just
today. Thank you.
just showing Crystal what happens when we go live on YouTube. All right,
Thank you.
producer, anytime you're ready.
All right, Cheryl, we are live on YouTube. What's it
y'all.
going down? Episode 4, and in 3, 2, go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You are listening to the Whistle Down Wind Down with Crystal and Mara, a podcast dedicated to our favorite Netflix series, Bridgerton, from Shondaland Media. You can find us on YouTube and whenever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All right, Crystal, what's new with you, girl? It's been a minute.
I know. Apparently, it's finally like summer here on the East Coast because we got some 80-degree plus weather. And most of us don't know what to do with ourselves because we're like, wait, hold on. It's like you want it to come, you're waiting for it, and then it finally shows up, and you're just like, wait, hold on. Are you sure? Because do I turn on the AC? Do I not? Do I put my stuff away? Do I not? Right? Like, because last time we got excited, we put away the cold things, and it got cold again. So, we're trying to make sure that we're sure this time around. But I'm happy that it's warming up because it's time. It's June 1st. June 2nd, whatever, but it's time. I'm really excited for the weather. And I'm hoping that it's here to stay with us throughout the summer months. And, get to enjoy that. That's me. What about you?
Nice. So out here in California, we kind of had the same thing. We didn't know if we should put on our scarves or take them off. We don't really have to worry about all those heavy jackets out here in California. Sorry, I had to just do a shout out. But what's been new going on with me? My puppy, well, she's not a puppy, of course, but she's 3 years old as of May 24th. And she is feeling better. I think the last time we talked last week, puppy baby girl got into something she wasn't supposed to get into. And over the Memorial Day weekend, I ended up going to the vet. So that was exciting. And like all of our dog parents that are listening, you know how it is. Next thing you know, you go home with an antibiotic and you're like nursing back a little pup. But her energy level is back, which is really great. And it's nice to have her back. And man, she's been keeping me outside for the last week or so. So we've been doing a lot more walking, which is really good. So I'm happy about that.
Oh, yay. It's nice to hear about this going well. All right, let's get into it. All right, y'all. Where are we going with this? All right, let's start with me. Who am I? I know. I'm Crystal, a wannabe librarian who loves to get lost in the story, and a Shonda stan who constantly asks, does this make me a bad feminist? I love a good romance novel, but thought Regency era fictions were my own guilty pleasure. I now know better.
And I'm Mara, a lover of British period dramas and a huge Jane Austen fan. If I could put myself anywhere, it would be in the writer's room at Shondaland to watch the magic happen. I didn't know there were others like me that enjoyed reading historical romance novels. I feel like I have found my people.
And today we are talking about Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story, episode 4, Holding the King.
So everybody go ahead and grab a glass of wine, tea, or another favorite beverage, and let's get into it. Cheers. Cheers.
All right, this is, I feel like this is literally, this episode is the ultimate recap of the recaps. I'm like, this feels like they know what Mara usually does when it comes time to go through the story. So I'd love to hear your recap of the great recap.
And you know what? No truer words were said. So with that being said, here it is. Here is your quick bread for episode 4. We pick up right where we left off. Our king was crying out to his Venus. We start from the beginning again and learn more about the royal crown's most kept secrets. Is it terrors that the king is suffering from? Is it anxiety? Is it stress? Is it disorganization of nerves? Might have to look that one up. Our king self-isolated after the wedding because his wife is brilliant and beautiful. Okay, never thought of that one as an example. Reynolds is the best wingman ever. Shout out to Reynolds. Our queen is pregnant, but this information seems to have become a trigger for the king. And to Crystal, our viewers, our producer, this is a very important question. Is Dr. Monroe a villain? Is he our first villain in the Bridgerton universe? So that's what I got for you.
Girl, listen, I got the doctor, Dr. Monroe. And wait till we get to Up to Snuff. We're going to talk about this, whether or not this man is a villain, because I think there's a lot of things to talk about there. Before we get there, of course.
I think he lied too, by the way. I think he lied about the type of tactics he says he doesn't use, but then when we look in this episode, he's doing the exact same thing he said he doesn't do. But let me stop, because I can hear my voice going higher because I'm upset. I'm upset what he did to our king, girl.
Yes. So this was a tough one. And even though this was a hard episode, it was very hard to watch. It was very uncomfortable. And it felt less like most episodes, we get something that's brand new. So we have time to kind of sit and get hit with all of this, all of the newness. But in this episode, because we're kind of seeing it now from a separate angle, it's kind of like, well, we know this story. We're getting like a little tidbit more about like, well, this is what was happening at the same time. And it wasn't, the feeling that I got from it was like this helplessness of just like, there's no right answer here. Like, oh, well, they should have done this or they should have done that. We don't really know. So even though this felt very tough and difficult as an episode, just seeing what was going on, there were still some favorites, I have to say. So with that, we're gonna pass the scones and get into our favorite moments. So cheers, Mara, and I'll let you get us started.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you. First of all, Chris Bowers, let me shout out. He's playing Beyonce Deja Vu in this episode, which I thought was absolutely fitting because why? We are reliving episodes 1 through 3 and kind of piggybacking off of what you said earlier, we're kind of getting more information and getting more information within certain time slots. So kind of like what's going on with the king prior to him meeting the queen out in the garden. What was happening with the king after he left the queen at Buckingham House. What has he been up to with his conversations with Dr. Monroe? And so just, deja vu is kind of like, I'm like, oh yeah, like it's kind, it kind of, of course, what the meaning of deja vu is, it's like you've almost like relived the moment again, but you didn't know, but you're not for sure if you did or didn't, but you're like, no, like I know I've been here before. And so that's kind of the feeling that, what about you? So I think we'll do like a back and forth on favorites.
Yes. I did feel that too. When I think the first time there was a scene that was being replayed, and I'm like, did I see this? And I did have that moment for myself of just like, wait, am I in the right episode? Like, I know I started this, what's happening. But so favorites, I have to give one of the favorites to, again, the costume design team on this season. So Lynn Paolo, Laura, I think it's for Khan. It might be frickin', I'm not sure. Well, I'll find it out. But again, the modern tactics, the tailoring, just like the fabrics that were used this season, like it's like unmatched. Like I know the previous seasons were done well, but I don't know what it is this season where it's just like everything shows up so much more. And I just every scene, it was like another thing to kind of turn to and be like, that's nice. And also like I can see that being translated into something for today. So that was definitely costume again, win. Yeah.
Love that. No, absolutely. Let's see. So let's go ahead and add a little part about the king. So during episode, what was it? Episode 2 or episode 3? Do you remember when Queen Charlotte is caught staring out the window when young Mozart comes to visit? I think this is kind of like the first couple days when her ladies in waiting have come to visit the queen, and young Mozart is at the piano playing. And then we see our Queen Charlotte like darn near like sandwiched her nose up against the window staring at our King Farmer George. Well, we find out within this episode that it was actually our Farmer George, our king, that actually probably had started it off when he took a secret visit to Buckingham House up in the attic just to go kind of get a little quick sightseeing of his beautiful queen. So I thought it was great to kind of see those two parallels of like both of them like liking each other, checking each other out, but you know there's this you know unknown barrier between the two of them. At least King George knows why there's this barrier, but Queen Charlotte doesn't know about it just yet though.
I appreciate that, the barrier piece, because if you think about it, both of them want to approach the other, but they don't know how to, or they're uncomfortable with just stepping out to do it. So that's a really good one. All right. The other one for me, so in that same vein, the king himself, it is now seeing when Charlotte comes walking in, because she just showed up at the observatory, and his reaction is, "Oh, hello." So I was already mad from the previous time I saw it, but it was worse this time because he was prepared for it. And this is what he thought to say. I had my reaction was just like, oh, it was worse this time around. And because it was, I loved it more. So I thought that kind of aloofness of like, oh, nothing's wrong. And like, oh, like what, you just happened upon this way? Like, you know, she didn't, sir. She crossed an entire court time, like, and oh, hello.
She broke protocol too, by the way. Like later on, he kind of like vents his frustrations to Reynolds. Also, a quick side piece in the book, Reynolds and the king have known each other since they were kids. Like that's how deep their friendship is. So little bit from the book. And yes, I am slowly but surely finishing up. So hopefully probably like episode 6, or maybe we might have to do like a bonus podcast episode where we can kind of just talk a little bit more about the book part. But yeah, so I just wanted to give you that little bit of nugget. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you because she broke protocol. It's damn near a scandal. Because the king told her to stay at Buckingham House, and she was like, "Nah, I'm out. I'm going to go see my boo," and no one can stop.
Ready the carriage, Reynolds. All right. So what's another one for you?
Okay, so another view. I mean, I can see on how I'm just going to be like on the side of King George, and you're going to be on the opposite end, because this is another one that I love about King George. So first and foremost, shout out to farmers all across this great world that do all that extra hard work, because they also bring a lot of wisdom. So during a moment in this episode, when our Farmer George is trying to show a new method to one of the farmers on his land on how to better plow the area for seeds, for seeding and stuff like that, King George is still kind of like undecided about, should he go see his wife? He really wants to go see his wife, but he's just so worried, so scared about we know what it is. It's because of his mental health, but he sees it as a deformity, which I know we'll probably get into and up to snuff. But he's so scared about himself and how he will be around her because he's still trying to keep this secret. And let me tell you what the farmer told him. Okay. Now, mind you, he's already had a couple sessions with Dr. Monroe, and it appears like he's been doing pretty well. He's been stabilized, right? So that's the best terminology I can give you. He seems to be stable with his mental health. But the farmer says, you won't know how something will work out until you try. Okay. The farmer. Now that's a free piece of advice. I don't know how much money King George is paying that doctor. Just gave him some free advice, and it is priceless. And I would have to give the farmer kudos, because I think if it wasn't for him and his advice, we may not have seen our queen and our king getting back together. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. Okay, so shout out to all the farmers out there. Peace and respect, and appreciate the wisdom.
And the offer for the crust of bread. He said I could run off and get you a little. And I said, wow.
God bless him, right? The king has like gourmet food on the table anytime he wants. But this farmer's like, look, I got you. What you need from the store, I'll go grab it.
He said, it's not gonna look like your table, but it's gonna be something. He'll hold you over for the ride back.
It's gonna fill you up. It's gonna fill you up. You good.
It is. So the other favorite I have is to the actor who plays Dr. Monroe. His name is Guy Henry. And it's the fact that he played his position real well, because I was uncomfortable from the beginning. First of all, you standing in the shadows like, let me watch what's happening. Then he's gonna stroll himself in. And it was, yes, it gave very much, it gave the guy from Beauty and the Beast that owned the asylum, it gave very much him. It gave Frollo from the 100 Dom. You see?
Oh,
and so
great parallel. Because I always thought that dude was creepy.
Yeah. His eyes were, I think they colored his eyes yellow in the movie, which I thought was real excess. What are y'all? Anyway, but it's that same kind of like, are they really, there's a discomfort because in this situation, you have nowhere else to turn, so you're willing to try anything. And then here comes somebody from Bedlam, no doubt. And I think anyone who's read Regency era fictions knows Bedlam or a Bedlam Institute, like it's notorious. And so as soon as, and I was really surprised that even when they said it, they said the name of it, I went like, I don't think that's good. And then they said, oh, the Madhouse. And I'm just like, oh, snap. I was like, definitely don't use him. But he played his part very well. And it, because of that, I think it sucks you enough into the story where you're kind of just like, I don't trust this man, but I want somebody to try to help him. And maybe he is going to help him. So that's that piece of it. So yeah, just kudos to the actor, Guy Henry, for his portrayal of Dr. Monroe, who, I don't know, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but he played his part pretty well.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, the word I'm thinking of is desperation, right? The king is desperate. The Dowager Princess is desperate. Parliament is desperate. The prime minister is desperate. Is desperate. The whole kingdom is desperate. They don't know it yet, but everyone. Well, actually, we do find out a little bit about how and why Queen Charlotte was chosen, because you know what, that is very odd that Dowager Princess has access to all these beautiful women of the time, okay? Far and wide, income is like excessive income. Why does a Dowager Princess choose a young 17-year-old from Germany? I just want to just put that out in the air. So our listeners, our viewers, please put in your, responses within the comments of this particular video, because I would love to see what everyone's input is, because that one, I think we I think we do get an answer by the end of the series, but still it's like, well, why? You had all this other access to all these young ladies and these great houses, but you choose to go outside of your own country to find a mate. So the desperation, I just kind of wanted to add, like, those were the things that I was kind of thinking of, that when the Dowager Princess was, talking to all these other physicians, she said, she's like, we've tried everything. And then Dr. Monroe comes in, and I don't know if he was taking advantage of that. Or was he genuinely saying, well, I've got a alternative method to offer everyone? I don't know. I don't know.
We get into it. All right. Well, I'm good on favorites because I can't wait to talk about Dr. Monroe. But did you have? I think you had a couple more.
Actually, I think that it can probably hold off. Yeah, we can go ahead and transition.
All right. So with that, we get to go to some of the most fun that I feel like we get to have here. We ask a bunch of questions that we really don't have answers to. We just really want to know why. So we're going to step into up to snuff, because we want to know if this decision making that these characters are making are up to snuff. Are they worth their weight in gold? And I think it would be great to start off with that question. Actually, maybe we'll come back to this Dr. Monroe towards the end and kind of like consensus on the villain theory. But the first question in regards to him is, was it working? Were his methods working?
I need a moment too, because it's tough to say, because there were certain, okay, I'm trying to be good, right? Because I'm not trying to mess up my own profession. There were certain, I'd say, theories that he was using that were successful. Okay. For instance, I mean, I would not have slapped the shit out of the king to get his attention, first and foremost.
Wait, about that. Okay, this was a big deal because I was excited. On here, I said, did he slap the king? I said, he slapped the king. The question though is, if you knew you could get away with it, would you think about that? If you knew that you could get away with it,
would you do it?
Would you do it?
No. Oh my goodness. And look, and the precision. I mean, he went down and came up. Like, it was like
handed. He's been doing that for years. That was a skilled hit. He didn't slip slide, it went direct, and it shocked everybody.
Look, I bet you the King's Guards did like a serious 60-second pause before running to go get him, okay? Because I was in shock. Like, when I first saw that, the first time I saw, the first time we're watching the episodes, my mouth dropped. I was like, oh, you about to die. But let me go ahead. So aside from that, I can tell you that some of the things that Dr. Monroe was doing is what I have seen in therapy. Therapists help to teach their clients on utilizing centering moments, helping a client when they are feeling anxious on how to focus on a particular object, on a sound, on a thought. So there were a couple of theories that Dr. Monroe was using that was non-harmful, that likely was helping the king to focus, which included focusing on his breathing, focusing on his thoughts. The king even acknowledges that he has constant thoughts, just conversations going on his mind constantly when he starts having these episodes. And I believe it was Julia Quinn and Shonda Rhimes. I think they said that they purposely made it a combination of different mental health diagnoses, so that it could not pinpoint one per se, but we saw maybe a little bit of a couple of ones that that clinicians probably could like pick out and say, oh, that would be this diagnosis, that would be that diagnosis. So I would say maybe like 25% of his theories were working that did not involve an ice bath.
Now, granted, I have no expertise in this, but I think the first moment where he kind of chipped away, when I was kind of like, my intuition says, don't trust this man. But the moment I was just like, well, he's right. Because he goes, you just have to talk to him. And so when he said that, I was like, yes, I said, the way that we talk about mental health, particularly in this country, it's always this thing. I don't even think it's in this country, even in like, just like, even in the way that we see it in books, in the way that it's talked about in movies, it's always kind of this thing where like we can't get to them anymore, right? So they're like off somewhere, and it's kind of like, in essence, like the lepers, right? Like you don't let them touch you, don't touch them, like you stay separate. And I felt like when he said like you have to talk to him, and I felt like, yeah, I'm like, we've seen like he's alone in this because he has the responsibility, right, for the, what is it, the misery or the of the country. Like it's, yeah, I know Mar got the good notes, but it's this notion that no one is talking to him, and it's kind of like, yeah, like he needs somebody to talk to, and so part of it is kind of like, yeah, like when he said that, like that touched me, where I was like, yes, I'm like, sometimes it's just a matter of like, you have to have a conversation with someone to understand what's happening. Maybe you can help just be an ear to someone. Maybe they need to get something out, but then it's also like, and that's not necessarily about diagnosis. That's about anybody who maybe isn't acting in a way that you're unclear about. Sometimes you just need to talk to them to understand. Like they'll tell you, this is what I do. Like when this happens, this is how I feel, and this is like a reaction that I have. And some of it may just be like, it's just unfamiliar, right? And so it's kind of that notion of like understanding someone more or better, so that you're able to help them when they need the help. In this scenario, right, within this episode, we can see that Reynolds is the one that knows him the most and knows when to step in, even though it's against protocol for him to touch the king, right? Mm-hmm. So it was all of those things, but that was kind of like the first step where I was just like, is it helping, or is this just like he happened to be like doing the humanly thing, I guess, or the humane thing in that sense? So that was still, look, I'm still confused. Like I still have the questions around it. And I worry if like, is there any real correlation in the work that he was doing? Or was it just a matter of like, he just happened to be in a period where he was not having an episode, right? That was the other, we don't know if it was it that 25% that was making it work, or was it just, he just happened to be outside of an environment where he's being stressed in a way that he's used to, right? He doesn't get time to himself to think about his stresses because he's constantly waiting to be told what to do and having to submit to everything. So, Dr. Monroe, stressing me.
I agree with you, especially like it really touched me when you mentioned that the part about when Dr. Monroe had said, well, just talk to him, because what it was doing was humanizing.
Mm-hmm.
It was humanizing George. It was just George, not King George,
Mhm.
but it was humanizing George. And Charlotte picked up on that. And we'll see through the next 2 episodes how she continues to use that method to help to humanize George and empower him. I absolutely agree with you on that one. Yeah, that was good.
Okay.
All right, so let me go ahead. So now, since we're talking about King George and Dr. Monroe, and now Charlotte is kind of sort of now trying to find out what's going on with her husband, because now she feels lied to because she entered a marriage and she had asked questions. So now talking about it, this is where her frustration comes from when she goes straight to the Dowager Princess the following morning after she and Reynolds wash down the king and get him in bed, all tucked in, looking all good in his big king size bed. Let me stop fantasizing. Sorry, let me focus. I'm here. But that is what Queen Charlotte, like, she was pissed because she had asked these questions before the wedding. She wanted to know, and she tried to utilize as many opportunities as she could with her brother, with Brimsley, with the Dowager Princess directly, with the King George himself. She asked, well, tell me about you, tell me everything. And he chose not to share those things. So of course, now walking in to go see the Dowager Princess, she's pissed off. So with that, my question to you is, was Queen Charlotte's reaction on how she's feeling and everything like that warranted upon discovering King George's rough edges? That's how the Dowager Princess kind of, in her monologue, kind of described the king's mental health, his rough edges. Do you think that the Charlotte is warranted in her feelings?
Yes, the answer is yes, number one. But I also understand a mother protecting her child, so she's not going to come out and tell you all of this stuff, as opposed to like let you see things and adjust as it comes. But I think she was fully warranted in being like, yo, what the heck? Like, it's okay if like the staff can't tell me. It's okay if like these are the people who I have to be set apart from, but we're not like that because we're both royals. Like, you know better than anybody else. Why wouldn't you give me some notion? And she called them peculiarities. And I was just like, it was frustrating. It's very frustrating. And I think when she comes in and it's all of the pieces are now clicking together, right? For her, when she's just like, first of all, her entrance was fire because she looked at his number one, but then she kind of walked in. She does not care that women's at breakfast. And she says, when she goes, the knives are dull. Suddenly, we can't cut anything. And just kind of like her kind of like running through this change. And then King Lear, like the fact that she specified the story. And part of me was just like, dang, that story was out at that time. Like
real deep, like very specific about that novel. I was like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, she knew it was missing. And which also made me think about it from like, again, so rewatching it, right? So we've already seen kind of like the different pieces of potential diagnoses. And I know that the book, particularly the book now is a lot thicker. What is it called? The DC-5? I can't remember what the name of the textbook is called now, but
it's the DC. It is the DSM.
The DSM. I knew there was a D. Oh, okay. I do numbers, y'all. So when she mentions just like the Mad King and then and that kind of being removed, and then just about the windows and the knives and the locks, that was the other thing, the locks. it all kind of like spoke to it's protection, but it's forced like caging is what it felt like, right? We're going to ensure that you can't hurt yourself. So we're just going to kind of like trap you in here. So we're trying to, it's kind of like you're trying to do the safe thing, right? You're putting the bumpers on the edges, but at the same time, no one's saying like, hey, this is why we need this, this is why we should know, or this is why. It's tough because again, I'm trying to remember that the amount of people that are in the place are mostly staff, and the staff are not allowed essentially to really talk to the royals. They're just here to do their jobs. And so really, when you think about it, she's all by herself. It's her, Brinsley, and no one else. And so no one's telling her the truth. So it's just like, this stuff is happening. No one's telling me why. And I'm just supposed to go along with it. So I could keep going and I'm going to slow myself down. But she was fully warranted in being mad and also coming to her in that way to be like, hello, like, why wouldn't you tell me so I have some like semblance? And it's unfair. Look at me. I'm trying to like, why am I? Okay, let me just cheers, everybody. Take a moment. Calm down with me.
The frustration. I mean, it's really the frustration because she knew something was up, but she didn't know how to identify it. And she was trying to ask the right questions to the right people. She was trying to ask them, and she was not getting responses. And she feels cheated and she feels lied to.
Correct.
She feels
ridiculous.
And she feels lied to. So that part is really tough.
Yes. And I think, well, one of the other things that came up in this episode, and like the lies are kind of, it always felt like it was always someone else's plan, right? So when the mom speaks for the king, or just what I didn't like was when the Dr. Monroe says, like with him, you'll be harmless and obedient, is like what he's like, when I'm done with you, you will be harmless and obedient. And my reaction to that was like, who wants to be harmless and obedient? Yes, he does not want to hurt her, but if he's the king, being harmless and obedient is not what the king is supposed to be. And so like one question is like, who wants that to be the truth? But then the other question that came up for me was, does the doctor care about the king, or does he just care about himself? Does that make sense? Because it felt like he wants to try these new experiments, right? And I think in many ways, his treatment of the king is probably because he could care less about the royal family or like authority. And in his mind, he thinks he's just knows what he's doing, and he wants to just test all of these theories out. And so it made me question, like, is he doing this because he cares about the king getting better, or is this really just to see like, oh, I can prove to everyone that I'm the best doctor out here and that my methods are sound, and this is more so about my research and I don't really care about anyone else. This could be my own language that I'm putting in here, but that was the thing. Like, do you think that he was there to know about the king, or was it really just like, his own status of like the king's physician?
So I'm going to answer that like a Jeopardy question, because I was kind of thinking about it from another angle, right? And so to tell me the line that Dr. Monroe said, that he would help the king become what again?
He just said when he's done with him, he said, you will be harmless and obedient.
Okay, so harmless and obedient, okay? And we're talking about a monarch, right? So now, for all my Game of Thrones fans, who would benefit from the king being harmless and obedient? Why would he choose those specific words? And who would he be obedient to? Who now we understand harmless because we understand a safety concern. Going back to the king mentioning that he believes he has a deformity, and he believes that this is the barrier that is keeping him from his wife because he wants to protect his wife, right? So it has to do with safety. So harmless, I'm like, okay, right? We mentioned the, the dull lights. And also, I just wanted sidebar. I keep going back to the meeting in the garden when the king is mentioning the scars on his body. One of those scars, he said that there's a cut with a dull knife, or he was being something with the knife. And I was just like, what were you really doing with the knife?
He did say he was clumsy with the knife.
Something like that, right? So sidebar on that, but now we're talking about being obedient. So I understand the harmless, because you don't want to hurt yourself, you don't want to hurt the people that you love, you don't want to hurt your queen. But obedient, what does that mean? Who are you being obedient to? You're the monarch, you're the king. You are at the top of the steeple. You are the head of the church. So are you being obedient to Parliament, to the Prime Minister, to your mother, to Dr. Monroe?
Mm-hmm. It does, yeah.
A little, it's kind of this, a little bit of this.
Mm-hmm. Like, who brought him in, right? Like, who? Because
somebody
the reality, somebody had to go out and find it. Someone had to have discretion in doing it. It's not Parliament, because Parliament isn't aware, but at the same time, is he being placed there, right? Like, it's an interesting way to think about it. Like, how is it? Yeah, like, why would it need to be those two things? To me, I feel like for him to have the power, to have the control, right? He's the one with all the keys to all the rooms to Bedlam, right? And so for me, that's why I think about it. I'm just like, this man just wants power. He made a comment about so there were two comments he made. He had said that the lighting here is not what he's used to when they moved to Buckingham House. Yeah, so because they have him in like a cellar essentially, and he's just, he's complaining about the lighting, and I'm just like, oh, okay, like, you don't like your quarters, right? You don't like your office space. And then he said, I worry about the effects of this whole place. I said, is he talking of it? When you say the effects of this whole place, like, what's the problem with this building compared to the other building? You're still doing the same work. So what is it about this place that you don't like? Is it the fact that you can't do what you want here because you know there's someone that's watching, right? Because you can't play Charlotte, because Charlotte's she's putting the pieces together. And so it made me think about like, again, with like the double speak of like, I'm saying one thing, but what I really mean is this other thing. Yeah, Dr. Monroe.
Dr. Monroe. Oh,
yeah. I'm just
wait. And another thing, Dr. Monroe's a liar, because when he was at that original meeting, he says that he does not do any type of bleeding, and he was trying to make fun of the other physicians and their practices. But guess what we saw at Q? We saw leeches on the king. The king was being bled out. Okay, did you see them see them tattoos? Them leeches were leaving on him. Upsetting. He is a liar.
Tattoos. Accurate. That is very true. The other thing that I did think that they did a good job of in this was their juxtaposition of both what's happening for Charlotte and what's happening for King George. And in Charlotte's space, like, she's just sad, like, right? Everything, she essentially has the perfect life, right? She's dressed in the morning, she's fed like sumptuous meals, anything she wants to do, she has the day to her, like whatever she wants to do. And then we have George, who is now being kind of pulled into this submissive peasant life where he is being tortured. I guess that, I don't know, but he's now being given to submission. He's eating oatmeal every day, which it's not the same sumptuousness. But he doesn't have this pampered living, right? He's living as a pauper in many ways. in this sense. Because, granted, they were dipping him in cold ice baths. There are some people who maybe their water is cold as well. They don't have heated water or someone to boil them water on the fire to bathe them. So it was very interesting to see like someone who's always had all of this access and power now being kind of like pulled down. And then someone who's always had freedom of decision and choice and just being like existing in the world, being given all of this access, but then no freedom of choice, and how neither of them were happy. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. You know what? That was a great montage. Like, I appreciated the montage sequence of both of their worlds being compared to each other, but the way that you just broke it down. Oh, absolutely. Oh, and ignore that chihuahua, y'all.
Hi.
I'm trying to tell her to leave the neighbors alone. But my voice got to be a little bit more higher because I know there's probably company watching and listening, and I'm trying to be professional. See, look at her. She a mess.
She's a good dog. So the other big thing that kind of came up, at least, is like kind of what just kept being the kind of like like the nervousness would come up whenever he got triggered. And I was trying to figure out like what were the big triggers for him. And I thought that they were change. Anytime there was change happening, and anytime the change was unexpected, like he got the news like suddenly, right? Because the way that we kind of have the beginning and the end of at the beginning and the end of this episode, we have the beginning trigger being your bride's on the way. Like, not, you don't have any choice in this, your bride's coming, right? And then we end with your child's coming, right? In both those scenarios, the news gets thrown at him, just like this is happening, and he didn't have a way to cope with it. Like he's immediately spiraling into, I guess, fear and concern. It's kind of like how I think of it. But I wanted to know if you thought of like what would you have deemed the other triggers for him? Like, what is it besides? Because I said it was kind of like I said change, but like what else, right? Because there are other moments in the episode where he had those things. Like, what would you say were the other triggers?
Well, his mom was a trigger. I could tell you that right now.
As a whole?
As a whole, that one was a trigger. That woman would trigger me too.
His mama? Okay, his mama. Uh-huh.
But his mama is a representation of the pressures of the crown.
Mm-hmm.
So she is the embodiment of that pressure. Especially when we look at the flashback of the very next night, him and Queen Charlotte, have their lovely first night together.
Magical buttons. It was amazing.
Did you just say
here comes mama?
Did you just say it's magical buttons? Yeah.
I said magical buttons. It was
yeah, okay. And here his mama runs up on him talking about, well, did y'all do it? Like, what's up? And the man, but he knows why she's there. She's not there as a concerned parent. She's there as a representation of his responsibilities as a king.
Yeah, his mama. Dang. I didn't think of it like that. I see it now.
His mama's a trigger. Because the monarchy has, and I think he does mention the word terrors, like specifically terrors. Like, that's traumaful to say something like that. Like, the position that you were born in induces terrors within you. Like, you are traumatized by it at such a young age, because you are forced into this position because you are going to be the future monarch. And so you have to learn all these things and be perfect. Yeah. I'm trying not to go into our next episode and trying to stay with this one, because we do learn more In episode 5, again, peeling back the onions. Boy, I tell you, the Bridgerton universe be loving peeling back these onions.
It's very true. Yeah. And I think the other thing is just that there's when things are being said in one way, they also could mean something different. I think they have a lot more of those in the next episode. But at this point, shout out to Tom Verica. Hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He directed this one, but just him being, the guy for this season in this universe. And so just shout out to him. This was a great episode. It's very well shot. And so, yeah, I'll say this. This episode was up to snuff because it had me in my feelings. And, ready to go back into the story now as we kind of like recap where the king has been and get a little bit more of an understanding to decide if we really want to be mad or not. So
very true. But Crystal, let me ask you this though. So towards the end of the episode, the king overhears the argument between Charlotte and the Dowager Princess. And he decides to run back to the doctor for more treatment. Do you think he should have done that? I was upset.
This is hard. Should he have gone back to? Oh, he's defeated. He's defeated when he goes back.
He does. Good point.
When he goes back to the doctor, and it's like he walks in. I'm sad. He's sad.
He'd been doing so well up until that point, especially with the spicy scenes. Like he'd been doing well. He'd been out there on the farm. Mm-hmm. He'd been out on the farm. He'd been doing his kingly duties in the bedroom. This man was living a good life.
He was doing well. And I think there's the piece of there's that piece about episodes, somebody having, I don't know if that's the proper term to use, but if someone's having an episode, then there could be reason for it. Something has happened, and at this time there was no real understanding to it. However, the trigger in this time was not a gentle welcoming of information. George, I have something to tell you. We gave up our even days, so guess what? There wasn't this care given in the sharing of the information. And so the fact that it came from the doctor who threw it at him, knowing his situation,
was that
I feel like,
because I kind of felt oh man.
I think he was wrong in his job as a doctor. I think he knew better than to throw that at him in the way that he did. I thought that was cruel. And which is why I don't think he's there. He's not really in support of the king at all. I hated that so much because I'm like, bro, what he's been through. Why would you do that? And in a defensive way too, this is not the time, right? He's still your patient in many ways. But he used that as ammunition, and I thought that was just super wrong. As a professional. Anyway, let's wrap this up, girl. This was really good. Wait, I feel like I had one little thing that I thought was interesting word that they used today. Oh, tipple. So he was supposed to be at his his wedding night. And so staff had already kind of gotten comfortable. And then one of the men that was on the stairs, that's the staff, he's leaning back and he's like, hey, come and have a tipple. And I was like, what's a tipple? And so a tipple is just to drink alcohol, and it's habitually, generally. So this is come. So we're gonna have ourselves a tipple. Perfect. I love that. We're gonna have some tipples going forward. But that's it. All right, y'all. That's it for us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast, please leave a review. And if you want to keep the conversation going, find us in the Whistle Down Wind Down Lounge on Facebook. And we'll see you soon for episode 5 when we get into gardens in bloom, because baby, we're going to talk about violets and the flower. Yeah. Anyway, all right, that's it. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a good day, evening, night, whatever.
Bye.
Got it. All right. We're just giving a little time for it to cut off because lately it's just been like, and I'm like, oh, wait.